Hey, thank you so much for watching, listening today. We're continuing our series on Seeing is Believing. And of course, I want you to subscribe. You know what? It would be good for you to send this to your friends and get them to subscribe because, seriously, this is amazing, helpful content. And I believe with all my heart that God can use this stuff to help you grow, to change, and to have some great freedom in your life. So share it with your friends. It'd be super helpful. And this is our third part of our series, Seeing is Believing. Now, we talked about the mechanics of your eyes, and last week, the perceptions that we have, the filters, the lenses. But this week, I want to ask an interesting question. I think it's helpful for us to ask the question, what does God see? You're like, why do I need to know what God sees? Well, I think it's important for us because a lot of times, I know for myself, I just go through my daily life with my own eyes, right? And my own perceptions and my own, this is what I think I see, and just at face value, just through me. But I think from time to time, it would be wise for us to ask God, what do you see? Because there's a good chance that what you see and what God sees are not the same. And it would be very helpful for you to have some awareness of what God sees. So let me give you a couple examples, and I think this will really kind of give you a pause and encourage you to ask, God, what do you see? What do you see? Because I'm not seeing clearly here. What do you see, God? So in 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 15 through 18, there's a huge army that's coming up against Israel, fighting against Israel, Old Testament stuff. They always have kings and nations that come, invade, fight. And what's happening in this situation is Elisha is with his servant, and they're in like a town village, and they're all hunkered down together, and there's a huge enemy army that has come to this village town and has surrounded it. And it looks like this overwhelming, massive quantity of soldiers and warriors that are amassing against the town village where Elisha is with his servant, and is threatening to conquer and overcome this town village. So Elisha's servant is understandably upset, nervous, anxious. And he's looking outside, opens the curtains. Oh my God, this massive, massive enemy army. They're imposing, they're threatening, and we don't have anything. I mean, we barely have maybe a kitchen knife. We have nothing against such an imposing army. But it was interesting because the servant is nervous, chewing his nails, getting anxious. What are we going to do, Elisha? And Elisha's calm as a cucumber. Hey, no big deal. Everything's Hakuna Matata, right? And you're like, what the heck? And that's the servant is like, how can you be so calm in the midst of such a fearful, imposing army, this enemy that's so massive? And it's interesting because Elisha prays and says, "Oh Lord, open the eyes of my servant that he may see." And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of the horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed and said, "Strike the people with blindness." And so I pray. So it's interesting because what happens is Elisha had spiritual vision to see God's provision, God's army that was far superior to the natural army. And Elisha prayed that his servant's eyes would be opened. And when he prayed that, the servant's eyes were opened, and the servant saw the armies of the Lord. And so Elisha's interesting because he could see in two ways. He saw naturally, and he saw spiritually. And a lot of times, if we don't ask God, what do you see? Then all we see is natural. All we see is what's in front of us. All we see is the news, the medical report. We see our kids or our parents saying dumb stuff, decisions, whatever. All we see is natural. But I would encourage you to ask God, this is what I see in the natural, but what do you see? Because if we don't ask God to show us what God sees, then we will be limited to just a human, natural existence and perception. Let me give you another example of what God sees. So this is in 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. And I like this. This is really interesting because this is when God has sent Samuel to the household of Jesse. This is on the heels of Saul, King Saul, kind of losing the plot and making bad decisions. Samuel's upset. Saul isn't following God's ways. And Samuel goes to God. God says, I'm going to anoint another king. Go to Jesse's house in Bethlehem and I will show you who will be the next king. And so Samuel goes to Jesse's house, and as he's there, he says to Jesse, do you have sons? Yes, I have several sons. And he says, well, I'd like to meet your son. So the first son comes, and Samuel sees him, and he's impressed. He's tall, he's handsome, he's, built, he's stocky, he's very, very gorgeous, and looks like a strong leader, an imposing, confident man. And Samuel's like, ooh, that's got to be the one God is picking. He's the dude. And I like this because God says to Samuel, remember, Samuel is a prophet. He is led by God and directed, and God is organizing his steps. And when Samuel sees this son, I think his name is Eliab, he's like, that's the one. And God says to Samuel, you are looking at the outside, but I look at the inside. And he says to Samuel, in essence, don't be moved by what you see externally, because what God says he sees is the inside of a person. And I think it's very important for us to ask God, what do you see? Because if we look at people, it's interesting. If we look at them face value and just look at, first impressions, if you will, and there's a book way back in the day called Dress for Success. We try to put on this like confident air and nice clothes and, how we image and all that stuff. And we can get distracted by the outside, but we would be wise to ask God, what do you see? What's the inside? What's internal to that person? Because if we're only led by the outside, the image, if they're, well-dressed and presentable and all that stuff, but we neglect the interior, then we can easily be deceived. And the same holds true on the other side. What if a person looks disheveled? They're not put together very well. Their hair's messed up. Maybe they don't wear makeup. Maybe they smell bad. Maybe they have BO, right? And you're like, woo, they look weird, freaky, they don't button their blah, blah, blah. We can see all that stuff, but if we don't ask to see what's on the inside, we might very well miss a key core person. And so I just encourage you, let's ask God, what do you see? Let's not be led by our natural eyes, but rather asking God to show us so that we have spiritual vision and not just natural vision. So thank you for subscribing. Hit the notification bell right there. That'd be really helpful. And let me ask you this question, answer this question. When you look at people, what do you prefer to see? Do you prefer to see kind of just a quick glance? Are you like, just a surface vision thing? Or when you look at people, do you like pause and kind of think, what's deeper? So let's think about that. Answer that question. A quick glance or a deeper vision? Which do you prefer? What's kind of your natural default? Quick or deeper? And of course, here we have our fantastic joke. And according to my kids, shout out to my kids, they say to me that my jokes are not cool for apparent reasons. Shout out to Isabel, Dave, and Benji. Love you guys. Thanks.